To perform a shoot action, first you have to be able to, and that means that you have an RAV and a number of ranged attacks rating on the model's data card. In the Bulwark Archer case, we obviously do. You also cannot be in hand-to-hand with an enemy if you want to make a shoot action. You have to be within the maximum range of the weapon you're using. In this case, their range is 12/18. That means they can shoot out to 12 inches with no penalty and up to 18 inches with a -1 penalty to their attack roll. And lastly, you have to have line of sight to the target. You can't shoot through walls or through buildings or anything like that. We start off by declaring our targets, and each of the cavemen declares that they're going to shoot at Kagunk the Ogre. Then we determine if any situational modifiers apply. You get a -1 to your roll if you're in extended range. That would be if they're beyond 12 for these shots, but still under 18 inches. If your target is flying, you take a -1. If your target's in cover, you're -2 to hit them. If they're shaken, you're +2 to hit them. And if you use a focus action, you're a +1 to hit them. This is just going to be a straight D10 roll plus the RAV of the models that are shooting. Next, the defender is going to declare what his defensive value is. This is the target number that we're going to try to roll to hit when we're attacking. In Kagunk's case, it is a 12 that we're shooting for. Each Bulwark Archer, or Caveman for today, has one ranged attack, so we're going to roll 1d10 for each one of them, adding 4 to the result for their RAV, and what we're trying to do is get a 12 or better on the rolls. And when we take a look at our rolls, we see we have a 9, an 8, a 1, a 3, and a 1. If we had other models in this troop taking ranged combat actions, we would resolve them now, and then before we apply damage, the defender gets a chance to take any defensive shots that they're allowed to do. In Kagunk's case, he has no RAV because he has no ranged combat weapons, so he gets no defensive shots, and then we go ahead and apply damage. When we add 4 to each one of our rolls, we see that we have a 13, a 12, a 5, a 7, and a 5. The 12 and 13 equal or exceed Kagunk's defensive value, so he's going to take 2 wounds. We're going to mark 2 sections off of his damage track. When you're playing the game, there's 2 things you want to always remember. One is that a 10 is an auto success. The other thing is always remember your special abilities. And we're going to be shooting this time at 2 Bugbear Warriors. Our Cavemen or Bulwark Archers still have a ranged attack value of 4. They have a range value of 12 and 18, so if they're at 12 or less inches to the target, there's no negative to hit, and here we see that they're all well within range. And what we're going to do differently for shooting at multiple targets is we have to declare who's shooting at what before we roll any dice. So you can see here I've got 2 orange dice that are going to be the shots at the lower bugbear, and 3 white dice represent the 3 shots that are going to go into the upper one. The bugbears have a base defensive value, or DV, of 11, so along with the RAV of 4 of my Bulwark Archers or Cavemen, I'm looking for at least 7 pluses on the dice to begin with. However, the bugbears have a special ability called Deflect, and they have a deflect rating of 1. What that means is against missile or ranged combat that the bugbears have a +1 to their DV. So now they have a 12, which means now I'm looking for 8 pluses on my rolls to hit. And on our roll we see we have a 9, a 7, a 1, another 1, and then a 10. On the bottom you see we have the 1 and the 10. On the top we have the 1, the 7, and the 9. Now the bottom, the 1 and the 10 with the RAV of the Cavemen turns into a 5 and a 14. On the top, it turns into a 5, an 11, and a 13. If you remember, originally we had a DV of 11, but it was +1 because of deflect, so it's a 12. 12s are what we're looking for. On the bottom, the 5 and the 14 is 1 hit and 1 miss. On the top, the 5 and the 11 and the 13 is 2 misses and 1 hit. So the result of this attack is that each bugbear suffers 1 wound or has one of their damage tracks marked off, but they're both still very much in the fight. Okay, to round out our explanations of ranged combat in Warlord, we're going to have a group of goblin skeeters squaring off against some skeleton archers, and for this example or demonstration I'm going to use some graphics on the screen instead of miniatures. Now what we have are 5 goblin skeeters that are going to be shooting into 3 skeleton archers, and some relevant stats about the miniatures are as follows. The goblin skeeters have a ranged attack value of 2. They have 1 ranged attack each. They have a defensive value of 7. You'll see why that matters in a second, even though they're shooting. They have a range of 12/18 inches, and they have the rapid shot ability. And then for the skeleton archers, they also have a ranged attack value of 2. They also have 1 ranged attack each. They have a slightly higher defensive value with an 8. They have a slightly longer range with a 15/20. They also have rapid shot, and they have deflect 1 as a special ability. As a quick reminder about some of the stats and the mechanics, to shoot, we'll be rolling a d10 per model, adding their ranged attack value to it. What we want to hit as our target number is the DV, the defensive value of the person or the model you're shooting at. For range, if you are equal to or under the number before the slash, you don't take a penalty. If you're over the first number, in the case of the goblins, if they're more than 12 inches away but less than 18, they can still shoot, but they're -1 on their shots. Rapid shot gives you an extra shot, but all of your shots are going to be a -1 when you're using rapid shot. The skeleton's deflect special ability is going to give them a bonus to their DV when they're faced with ranged combat. So they already have a DV of 8, they're going to be getting shot, so deflect 1 adds 1 to their DV, gives them a DV of 9 against ranged combat. Okay, so we're ready to shoot, and what we're going to say is, for this example, the goblins have the activation, so they're going to be declaring shots. And what we're going to do is declare that all the goblins are going to shoot into all of the skeletons. We would already have checked to make sure that everybody has a line of sight and we're within range. We're going to say that for this combat, all of the models are within 13, 14, 15 inches, so they're all going to be within short range of the skeletons. That's going to matter in a minute, and they're all going to be within the long range of the goblin skeeters. So with some quick calculations, we see that the target number for the goblin skeeters is going to start off at an 8 because that's the DV of the skeleton archers. It's going to be 9 because of their deflect value. It goes up to 10 because we're at long range, and since we want to get a lot of shots off, we're going to use rapid fire, so we'll get twice as many shots, but ultimately our target number is going to be an 11. And then after rolling 10 dice to hit, because we're getting twice as many attacks, we end up with a 2, a 2, a 4, a 4, another 4, 2 6s, an 8, a 9, and a 10. When we add the 2 RAV of the skeleton archers to it, we find that on the high rolls, our 10 becomes a 12, and 9 becomes an 11, the 8 becomes a 10. The rest we know are going to be misses or non-damaging hits just because they're so low. The 8 that turns into a 10 isn't the 11 that we needed, so that's discarded. The 9 that becomes an 11 is going to be a damaging hit. The 10 that becomes a 12 is a damaging hit regardless of whether we added 2 to it or not, because a 10 always is going to hit and cause damage. So our net result right now is going to be 2 damaging hits on the skeletons. We would mark off 2 damage tracks, 1 from each of 2 skeletons. They only have 1 damage track each. Normally we would remove them, but they get a chance to shoot back with defensive missile fire. Since the skeleton archers have a ranged weapon, they're archers, and they're not in base-to-base contact with enemy models, they now get to shoot back using defensive missile fire. And they're also going to use rapid shot, so their target number that they're looking at is going to be increased by 1 because of that. They're still within their short range because we said everything was under or at 15 inches, so they're good there. So normally their target number is going to be a 7 because of the DV of the goblin skeeters. It's going to go to 8 just because we're using rapid shot, so it's going to be 1 harder to hit them, but that is all they're looking at right now, is needing 8s to hit. And after rolling their 6 dice, we get 2 2s, a 6, 2 7s, and an 8. The 2s we can throw away. The 6 becomes an 8, the 7s become 9s, and the 8 becomes a 10. So on the return fire, we have 4 damaging hits going into the goblin skeeters. Now once you're done establishing all of your hits and misses and damaging hits and everything, that's when damage takes effect. So what we'll do is we would pull off 2 of the skeleton archers and 4 of the goblin skeeters. So when you're using ranged combat in Warlord, you really have to be, or try to be, aware of the ranges you're at, if your opponent is going to get defensive missile fire, if maybe they are better missile troops than your guys that are shooting into them. Bear those things in mind. Think about what kind of negatives you're going to be at when you're shooting. Is it really worth taking the shot at these guys, or should you be shooting or moving and shooting at somebody else?